The scent of lavender fabric softener clung to Peter's shirt as I pulled it from the dryer. It was a comforting smell, one that usually brought a smile to my face. But not today. Today, as I reached into his pocket to check for loose change before folding, my fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. I fished it out, my heart racing as I uncurled my fingers. There, nestled in my palm, was a delicate gold wedding band. But it wasn't mine. Hannah? Peter's voice echoed from downstairs. Have you seen my blue tie? I froze, the ring burning in my hand. Just a minute, I called back, my voice surprisingly steady. I quickly slipped the ring into my own pocket and grabbed his tie from the laundry basket. As I descended the stairs, Peter was pacing in the living room, checking his watch. There you are, he said, barely looking up. I'm running late for my meeting. I handed him the tie, studying his face. Did he know I'd found the ring? Was there a flicker of guilt in his eyes? But he just gave me a perfunctory peck on the cheek and headed for the door. Peter, I said, my voice catching. He turned, eyebrows raised. I was thinking we could have dinner together tonight. It's been a while since we've had a proper meal, just the two of us. He sighed, checking his watch again. I don't know, Hannah. This project is really heating up. I might be working late. Oh. I tried to hide my disappointment. Well, maybe tomorrow then? We'll see, he said, already halfway out the door. Don't wait up. The slam of the door echoed through the empty house. I sank onto the couch, my hand instinctively reaching for the ring in my pocket. 20 years of marriage, and this is what it had come to. Secrets and lies wrapped in a gold band that wasn't mine. I pulled out my phone, my finger hovering over my best friend Maggie's number. But what would I say? Hey, Mag, I think my husband's cheating on me. The words stuck in my throat. Instead, I found myself dialing another number. It rang twice before a cheerful voice answered. Moore and Associates, how may I direct your call? Yes, hello, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I'd like to speak with someone about hiring a private investigator. There was a pause on the other end. Of course, ma'am. I'll transfer you to Mr. Moore. May I have your name? I hesitated, then squared my shoulders. Hannah Thompson. As I waited to be transferred, I caught sight of our wedding photo on the mantel. Peter and I, young and in love, beaming at the camera. When had that happiness slipped away? And more importantly, how had I not noticed? The line clicked and a deep voice came on. Mrs. Thompson, this is Jack Moore. I understand you're interested in our services. I took a deep breath, twisting the ring, my ring, on my finger. Yes, Mr. Moore, I need your help. I think my husband is having an affair. There was a moment of silence. Then Mr. Moore spoke again, his voice gentle but professional. I'm sorry to hear that, Mrs. Thompson. Can you tell me what's led you to this conclusion? I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat. How could I explain the years of growing distance, the late nights at the office, the way Peter's eyes no longer lit up when he saw me? And now, the damning evidence of that other ring, hidden away in Peter's pocket like a dirty secret. As I struggled to find the right words, I heard the front door open. My heart leapt into my throat. I'm sorry, Mr. Moore, I whispered urgently. I have to go. I'll call you back. I ended the call just as Peter walked into the living room, his brow furrowed. Hannah, who were you talking to? I plastered on a smile, hoping he couldn't hear the pounding of my heart. Oh, just Maggie. Girl talk, you know? He nodded absently, already loosening his tie. Listen, I forgot some files I need for my meeting. I'll be heading back out in a minute. As he climbed the stairs, I felt the weight of the other woman's ring in my pocket, a silent accusation against the man I thought I knew. In that moment, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront Peter, not yet. First, I needed answers, and I would get them, no matter the cost. I couldn't sleep that night, tossing and turning as memories of Peter and I flooded my mind. How had we gone from that bright-eyed couple to this? I glanced at Peter's sleeping form, his back turned to me. When had that become the norm? As dawn broke, I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him. In the kitchen, I absently stirred my coffee, lost in thought. The first time I met Peter flashed before my eyes. A chance encounter at a bookstore, both of us reaching for the same novel. You have excellent taste, he'd said, flashing that charming smile that made my heart skip a beat. We'd spent hours talking that day about books, dreams, life. It felt like I'd known him forever. Now, 20 years later, I wondered if I'd ever really known him at all. The sound of Peter's footsteps jolted me back to reality. He entered the kitchen, already dressed for work. "Morning," he mumbled, barely glancing my way as he poured his coffee. I took a deep breath. "Peter, I was thinking, maybe we could take a weekend trip soon? Just the two of us?" He frowned, checking his phone. "Hannah, you know how busy work is right now. I can't just take off." "It doesn't have to be now." I pressed. "Maybe next month? We could go to that little B&B we loved, remember?" Peter sighed, finally looking at me. "Look, I appreciate the thought, but now's not a good time. Maybe later, okay?" As he turned to leave, I felt something inside me snap. "When is it ever a good time, Peter? When was the last time we did anything together?" He paused, his back to me. "Hannah, don't start. I don't have time for this right now." "You never have time," I exclaimed, my voice rising. "You're always working, always busy. It's like I don't even exist anymore." Peter whirled around, his face flushed with anger. "What do you want from me, Hannah? I'm working my ass off to provide for us, and all you do is complain." His words hit me like a slap. "All I do? I've dedicated my life to our home, to you. And this is how you repay me?" For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by cold indifference. "I have to go," he said flatly. "We'll talk about this later." As the door slammed behind him, I sank to the floor, my body shaking with sobs. How had we become strangers living under the same roof? With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and dialed Mr. Moore's number. It was time to face the truth, no matter how painful. "Mrs. Thompson," his calm voice answered. "I'm glad you called back. Are you ready to proceed?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Yes, Mr. Moore, I need to know the truth about my husband." "I understand," he replied. "Can you tell me about any suspicious behavior you've noticed?" I hesitated, then spilled everything, the late nights, the emotional distance, and finally, the ring I'd found. As I spoke, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. "That's certainly concerning," Mr. Moore said when I finished. "We'll start our investigation immediately. But Mrs. Thompson, I must warn you, are you prepared for what we might uncover?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications. Was I ready to have my worst fears confirmed, to have my entire life upended? "I have to know," I whispered, more to myself than to Mr. Moore. "Whatever it is, I need to know the truth." "Very well," he replied. "We'll be in touch soon with our findings." As I ended the call, I noticed a text from Peter. "Working late tonight, don't wait up." My fingers hovered over the keypad, a dozen angry responses flashing through my mind. Instead, I simply replied, "Okay." I looked around our home, filled with memories of happier times, photos of our wedding, our honeymoon, holidays spent together. Each image now felt like a mockery of what we'd become. Whatever Mr. Moore uncovered, I knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same again. And as that realization sank in, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The worst was yet to come, but for the first time in years, I was ready to face it head on. The manila envelope sat on the kitchen table, taunting me. Mr. Moore had delivered it personally this morning, his face grim as he handed it over. "Mrs. Thompson," he'd said, "I think you should prepare yourself." Now, hours later, I still couldn't bring myself to open it. The truth I'd been seeking suddenly felt too heavy to bear. But as I heard Peter's key in the lock, I knew it was now or never. "Hannah?" Peter called out, his voice echoing through the house. "You home?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. In the kitchen. He walked in, loosening his tie. His eyes fell on the envelope. "What's that?" "Why don't you tell me, Peter?" I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I pushed the envelope towards him. "Go ahead, open it." Confusion flickered across his face as he reached for it. "Hannah, what's going on?" "Just open it," I repeated, my heart pounding. As Peter pulled out the contents, photographs, hotel receipts, a transcript of a damning phone conversation, I watched the color drain from his face. "Hannah," he started, his voice low. "I can explain." "Explain." I cut him off, anger surging through me. "Explain how you've been lying to me for months, how you've been sneaking around with her." I grabbed one of the photos, shoving it in his face. It showed Peter and a young blonde woman, locked in an intimate embrace outside a hotel. "Who is she, Peter? How long has this been going on?" He ran a hand through his hair, sighing heavily. "Her name's Amber. We met at a conference 6 months ago. It just happened." "It just happened," I repeated incredulously. For 6 months? And what about this? I pulled out the other woman's wedding ring from my pocket, the one I'd found in his laundry. Peter's eyes widened in recognition. Where did you? It doesn't matter, I snapped. What matters is that you've been living a double life, Peter. You've made a fool of me, of our marriage. Oh, come on, Hannah, Peter scoffed, his initial shock giving way to defensiveness. It's not like our marriage has been perfect. When was the last time you did anything besides play housewife? His words hit me like a slap. Play housewife? I've dedicated my life to our home, to you. And that's the problem, Peter shouted, slamming his hand on the table. You've become nothing but a housewife. Where's the woman I fell in love with, the one with dreams and ambitions? I stared at him, stunned. So this is my fault? Because I chose to support you, to build our life together? Peter's face softened slightly. Hannah, that's not what I meant. It's just, things change, people change. And instead of talking to me about it, you decided to cheat? I felt tears stinging my eyes. Was I really that unimportant to you? Of course not, Peter said, reaching for my hand. I jerked away. Hannah, please, we can work this out. I'll end things with Amber. We can go to counseling. No, I cut him off, my voice firm. There's no coming back from this, Peter. You've broken us beyond repair. So that's it? Peter's voice rose again. 20 years of marriage, and you're just giving up? I'm not the one who gave up, I shot back. You did that the moment you decided to betray me. We stood there, the weight of 2 decades crumbling between us. Finally, Peter spoke, his voice cold. Fine. If that's how you want it, I'll call my lawyer in the morning. As he stormed out of the kitchen, I called after him, Peter. He turned, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Don't forget to take your girlfriend's ring with you, I said, tossing it at his feet. The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the house. I sank into a chair, my body shaking with sobs. Everything I thought I knew, everything I'd built my life around had just shattered. But as the initial shock subsided, I felt something else stirring within me. A spark of determination. Peter might have broken my heart, but I refused to let him break my spirit. Whatever came next, I would face it head on. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. The house felt emptier than ever as I wandered from room to room, unable to settle. It had been 3 days since my confrontation with Peter, and he hadn't come home since. Part of me was relieved, but another part, a part I hated, missed him desperately. I found myself in our bedroom, staring at the photos on the dresser. 20 years of memories, now tainted by betrayal. As I picked up our wedding photo, something inside me cracked. What if I had overreacted? What if there was still a chance to save our marriage? Before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed my phone and dialed Peter's number. It went straight to voicemail. Peter, it's me, I said, my voice shaking. I think we need to talk. Please come home. Hours passed with no response. I paced the living room, rehearsing what I'd say when he arrived, how I'd apologize for my anger, how we could work through this together. But as night fell, the house remained silent. Just as I was about to give up hope, I heard a key in the lock. My heart leaped as Peter walked in, looking tired and disheveled. Hannah, he said, his voice wary, I got your message. I took a deep breath. Peter, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have reacted so harshly. I think if we just talk. Stop. He cut me off, holding up a hand. Hannah, I'm only here to get some clothes. I'm staying at Amber's for now. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. You're living with her? Peter sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's complicated, Hannah. But yes, I am. But I called to apologize, to try and work things out, I stammered, feeling foolish and small. Work things out? Peter laughed bitterly. Hannah, our marriage has been over for a long time. We were just going through the motions. That's not true, I protested weakly. We can fix this, Peter. We can go to counseling, try to reconnect. I don't want to fix it. Peter exploded, his face flushed with anger. Don't you get it? I'm in love with Amber. She understands me in a way you never have. I felt like I was drowning, grasping for anything to keep me afloat. But what about our life together? Our home, our memories. Peter's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry, Hannah. I truly am. But I can't keep living a lie. Amber's pregnant. We're starting a family together. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Pregnant, I whispered, my voice barely audible. How long have you known? A few weeks, Peter admitted. I was trying to find the right time to tell you. Anger surged through me, momentarily displacing the shock. The right time? Was that before or after you let me humiliate myself by begging you to come back? Peter at least had the decency to look ashamed. I'm sorry, Hannah. I never meant for things to end this way. As he turned to head upstairs, presumably to pack his things, something inside me snapped. You're sorry? I shouted, following him. You destroy our marriage, get another woman pregnant, and all you can say is you're sorry? Peter whirled around, his face contorted with frustration. What do you want from me, Hannah? I've made my choice. It's time for you to accept it and move on. Move on? I laughed hysterically. You've taken everything from me, Peter. My trust, my love, my future. What exactly am I supposed to move on to? For a moment, I saw a flicker of the man I'd fallen in love with in Peter's eyes, but it quickly vanished, replaced by cold determination. That's not my problem anymore, Hannah. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce proceedings. As Peter disappeared into our bedroom, no, his old bedroom, I stood frozen in the hallway. The life I'd known, the future I'd planned, was crumbling around me. But as the initial shock wore off, I felt something else rising within me, a fierce, burning anger. Peter might think he'd taken everything from me, but he was wrong. I still had my dignity, my strength, and as I listened to him pack, I made a decision. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of my revenge. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday, a crisp manila envelope that felt like a death sentence for my marriage. I stared at Peter's signature, the familiar scrawl now seeming cold and foreign. My hands shook as I reached for the phone, dialing my sister Kate's number. Hannah, what's wrong? Kate's concerned voice came through. He's really doing it, Kate, I choked out. Peter's filed for divorce. Oh, honey, Kate sighed. I'm coming over. Don't you dare sign anything until I get there. An hour later, Kate was at my kitchen table, poring over the documents. Her brow furrowed as she flipped through the pages. Hannah, have you read this thoroughly? I shook my head, still numb. I just saw his signature and... Kate's face hardened. Well, you need to read it. Peter's trying to screw you over. Those words jolted me out of my stupor. What do you mean? He's claiming that since you were just a housewife, Kate spat the words, you're not entitled to half of the assets. He's offering you a pittance, Hannah. Anger flared within me, momentarily displacing the grief. How dare he? I supported him through law school, I managed our home. I know, sis, Kate interrupted gently, but Peter's a lawyer. He knows how to manipulate the system. As the reality of the situation sank in, a new wave of despair washed over me. What am I going to do, Kate? I don't have any money of my own. How can I fight this? Kate squeezed my hand. You're not alone, Hannah. We'll figure this out. Just then my phone buzzed with a text. It was from an unknown number. Mrs. Thompson, this is Jack Moore. I have some information you need to see. Can we meet? I showed the message to Kate, explaining about the private investigator I'd hired. Hannah, Kate said slowly, I think you need to meet with him. Peter's playing dirty. It's time you fought back. The next day, I met Mr. Moore at a quiet cafe. He slid a thick folder across the table. Mrs. Thompson, what I found goes beyond just the affair. With trembling hands, I opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, property deeds, and offshore account details. My eyes widened as I realized what I was looking at. Peter's been hiding assets, Mr. Moore explained. Significant ones. He's been preparing for this divorce for months, maybe even years. The betrayal cut deep, but something else was rising within me. A fierce determination. What does this mean for the divorce? Mr. Moore leaned forward. It means you have leverage, Mrs. Thompson. Peter's committed fraud. If this comes to light, he could lose his law license. As the implications sank in, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Thank you, Mr. Moore. You've been incredibly helpful. Leaving the cafe, I called Kate. I need you to recommend a good divorce lawyer, I said, my voice steady. The best you know. Hannah? Kate sounded surprised by my tone. What happened? I'm done being the victim, Kate. Peter thinks he can walk all over me. He's about to learn how wrong he is. That evening, as I sat in my empty house, I pulled out an old photo album. Pictures of Peter and me in happier times stared back at me. I traced Peter's face in our wedding photo, remembering the man I thought I'd married. You should have been honest with me, Peter, I whispered to the smiling face. Now all bets are off. I closed the album with a snap, my mind made up. Tomorrow I'd meet with a lawyer. I'd fight for what was rightfully mine. And Peter? He was about to discover that the just a housewife he'd dismissed was a force to be reckoned with. As I climbed into my bed that night, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Hope. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of my comeback. The sleek office of Sarah Goldstein, divorce attorney extraordinaire, felt like a war room. Spread across her desk were the documents Mr. Moore had provided, along with the insulting divorce papers Peter had served me. "Hannah," Sarah said, her eyes sharp behind her glasses, "with this evidence of hidden assets, we have a strong case, but we need to move fast." I nodded, a newfound determination coursing through me. "What's our next step?" "We file a countersuit," Sarah explained. "We'll demand a full financial disclosure and push for an emergency hearing. Peter won't see it coming." As we strategized, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Peter. "We need to talk. Meet me at the house tonight." I showed Sarah the message. She frowned. "Be careful, Hannah. He might be trying to manipulate you." "I know," I replied, my jaw set. "But I'm not the same woman he left behind. I can handle Peter now." That evening, I walked into our once shared home, my heart pounding, but my resolve firm. Peter was waiting in the living room, looking haggard. "Hannah," he started, his voice softer than I'd heard in months. "I've been thinking maybe we rushed into this divorce. Maybe we could try counseling?" For a moment my heart leapt, but then I remembered the hidden assets, the lies, the other woman carrying his child. "Why the sudden change of heart, Peter?" He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I once found endearing. "I miss you, Hannah, our life together. It's not the same with, well, you know." "With Amber?" I supplied, watching him flinch at the name. "Your pregnant girlfriend?" Peter's eyes widened. "How did you—" "I know a lot of things now, Peter." I cut him off, including the offshore accounts and hidden properties. The color drained from his face. "Hannah, I can explain." "Save it," I snapped. "I'm done with your explanations and your lies. You wanted a divorce? You've got one, but it's going to be on my terms now." Peter's demeanor changed instantly, his face hardening. "You're bluffing. You don't have any proof." I pulled out my phone, showing him a photo of one of the documents Mr. Moore had provided. "Want to bet your law license on that?" For a moment, I saw fear in Peter's eyes. Then, like a cornered animal, he lashed out. "You think you can threaten me? I made you, Hannah. Without me, you're nothing but a washed-up housewife." His words stung, but I refused to let him see how they affected me. "Is that what you think? Well, this washed-up housewife is about to take you for everything you've got." Peter lunged forward, grabbing my arm. "You can't do this to me. I won't let you ruin everything I've worked for." Fear surged through me, but I stood my ground. "Let go of me, Peter. Now." Just then, the front door burst open. Kate rushed in, followed by a police officer. "Hannah, are you okay? I got worried when you didn't answer my calls." Peter released me immediately, stepping back. The officer looked between us. "Is everything all right here?" I rubbed my arm, already feeling bruises forming. "No," I said firmly. "It's not. I'd like to press charges for assault." As the officer led Peter away, reading him his rights, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and a grim satisfaction. Kate hugged me tightly. "Oh, Hannah, I'm so sorry. Are you sure you want to go through with the charges?" I nodded, watching as Peter was placed in the police car. Yes, it's time he faced consequences for his actions. That night, as I lay in bed, the events of the day replayed in my mind. Peter's attempt at reconciliation, his true colors showing when cornered, the fear I'd felt when he grabbed me. But beneath it all was a steely resolve. I'd stood up to Peter. I'd refused to be manipulated or intimidated. For the first time in years, I felt truly in control of my life. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, court hearings, divorce proceedings, rebuilding my life. But as I drifted off to sleep, I knew one thing for certain: I was ready to face whatever came next. The old Hannah was gone, and in her place was a woman who would never again let anyone underestimate or mistreat her. The courthouse loomed before me, its stone facade a silent witness to countless battles. Today it would host mine. I smoothed my skirt, took a deep breath, and walked in, Sarah Goldstein at my side. "Remember," Sarah whispered, "stay calm, no matter what Peter or his lawyers say. We have the upper hand." I nodded, steeling myself as we entered the courtroom. Peter was already there, looking polished in an expensive suit, Our eyes met, and I saw a flicker of surprise, perhaps at my composure, or the determination in my gaze. As the judge entered and proceedings began, I felt a surreal calm. This was it, the moment that would define my future. Peter's lawyer spoke first, painting me as a vindictive wife, making false accusations out of spite. I clenched my fists under the table, willing myself to remain stoic. Then it was Sarah's turn. She stood, her voice clear and confident. "Your Honor, we have evidence that Mr. Thompson has committed fraud by hiding substantial assets." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Peter's face paled as Sarah presented the documents from Mr. Moore. His lawyer scrambled to object, but the judge overruled him. As Sarah detailed the offshore accounts and properties Peter had concealed, I watched him squirm. For the first time I saw fear in his eyes, the fear of a man whose carefully constructed world was crumbling. Then the bombshell. "Furthermore, Your Honor," Sarah continued, "we have evidence of Mr. Thompson's infidelity, including his relationship with a woman who is now pregnant with his child." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Peter's lawyer leaned in, whispering furiously to him. "I caught fragments. Didn't tell me. Changes everything." The judge called a recess, and as we filed out, I felt lightheaded. Sarah squeezed my arm. "You're doing great, Hannah. Stay strong." In the hallway, Peter cornered me. "How could you do this?" he hissed. "You're ruining everything." I stood my ground. "No, Peter. You ruined everything when you decided to betray our marriage." His eyes narrowed. "You think you've won? I still have tricks up my sleeve. By the time I'm done, you'll be lucky if you get a penny." Before I could respond, a commotion erupted near the courtroom doors. A young blonde woman burst in, her pregnant belly obvious. "Peter!" she cried. "What's going on? Why didn't you tell me about this hearing?" "Amber, Peter's mistress." The woman carrying his child. Our eyes met, and I saw confusion and hurt in hers. In that moment, I felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. She, too, had been deceived by Peter. Peter looked panicked, caught between his wife and his pregnant girlfriend. "Amber, you shouldn't be here. Please, just go home." "Go home?" Amber's voice rose. "I'm carrying your child, Peter. You promised we'd be together." The hallway had gone silent, all eyes on our drama. I saw pity in some faces, disgust in others. Peter, the man I'd loved for 20 years, looked small and pathetic. Suddenly, Amber turned to me. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I didn't know. He told me you were separated, that you didn't love him anymore." The weight of it all, the lies, the betrayal, the public humiliation, crashed over me. I felt my knees buckle, but Sarah caught me, steadying me. "Mrs. Thompson," the bailiff called, "the judge is ready to resume." As we re-entered the courtroom, I felt as if I was walking through a fog. Peter's deceptions had hurt not just me, but this young woman too. The life I'd built, the future I'd planned, all of it was gone. But as I took my seat, facing the judge, a strange clarity washed over me. This wasn't just about the money or the assets anymore. It was about justice, about standing up for myself and every other woman who had been lied to and manipulated. I looked at Peter, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. "You've lost, Peter," I said quietly. "Not just the case, but everything that ever mattered." As the judge called the court to order, I sat up straight, ready to face whatever came next. The old Hannah might have crumbled under the weight of this moment, but the woman I'd become? She was ready to fight and win. The sun streamed through the windows of my new apartment, casting a warm glow on the freshly painted walls. It had been 6 months since the fateful day in court, and my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. I sipped my morning coffee, savoring the quiet moment before starting my day. The stillness was interrupted by a ping from my phone, a news alert. My heart skipped a beat as I read the headline, "Prominent lawyer Peter Thompson disbarred for fraud and ethical violations." A mix of emotions washed over me: vindication, sadness, and finally, a sense of closure. I had won the divorce settlement, exposing Peter's hidden assets and securing my financial future. But the victory had come at a cost. The scandal had rocked our community, and Peter's career had crumbled in the aftermath. As I scrolled through the article, my phone rang. It was Kate. "Hannah, have you seen the news?" she asked, her voice a mix of concern and excitement. "I just did," I replied, surprised by the calmness in my voice. "How are you feeling about it?" Kate paused. "I'm more concerned about how you're feeling. Are you okay?" I took a deep breath, considering her question. You know what, Kate? I really am. For the first time in years, I feel free. We chatted for a few more minutes before I had to get ready for work. Yes, work. In the months following the divorce, I had rediscovered my passion for interior design, a dream I had set aside when I married Peter. Now I was apprenticing at a local firm, learning the ropes and building a new career. As I walked to the office, I passed the coffee shop where Peter and I used to have our Sunday brunches. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of a familiar face, Amber, Peter's former mistress. Her baby bump had given way to a stroller. Our eyes met, and after a moment's hesitation, she gave me a small, sad smile. I nodded in return, feeling a surprising lack of bitterness. We had both been victims of Peter's deception, in our own ways. At the office, my colleague Sandra greeted me with a knowing look. "Quite the headlines today, huh?" she said, handing me a stack of fabric swatches. I nodded, focusing on the task at hand. "Life has a way of balancing the scales," I replied, surprised by the wisdom in my own words. As the day progressed, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past year. The pain of betrayal, the fear of an uncertain future, the struggle to reclaim my identity. It had all led me here, to this moment of strength and self-discovery. That evening, as I walked home, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Peter. My heart raced as I opened it. "Hannah, I know I have no right to ask, but I need help. Can we talk?" I stared at the message, memories of our life together flashing through my mind. The young, ambitious lawyer I had fallen in love with, the man who had betrayed and belittled me, the broken figure in the courtroom, watching his lies unravel. Taking a deep breath, I typed my response. "I'm sorry, Peter, but that chapter of our lives is closed. I wish you well, but I can't be the one to help you anymore." As I hit send, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The last tie to my old life had been severed. I was no longer Peter's wife, no longer the woman who would sacrifice her own needs for his ambitions. I was Hannah, strong, independent, and finally, truly free. Entering my apartment, I was greeted by the vision board I had created, filled with dreams and goals for my new life. Travel plans, design projects, even a tentative sketch for a book I hoped to write someday. Each item represented a piece of myself I was reclaiming and nurturing. As I settled onto my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the sun set over the city, I felt a profound sense of peace. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I was excited about the journey. "Here's to new beginnings," I whispered to myself, raising my glass to the fading light. The Hannah who had started this journey would never have believed where it would lead. But the woman I had become, she was ready for anything life might bring. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all.